What's up, YouTube? Jeff Bryans here, back with another review. I know it's been a while. Let's just say the supply chain has made it really difficult to review product in 2021. I know I promised a review of the Arctic Cat Alpha in turbo form, and here we are. So, couple of disclaimers before I get into this review. First, I do work for Silber. This is not a review of the turbo kit. However, I think it's worth noting I don't make a lot of money from Silber. It's very much a side job. It's a way for me to get a ride snowmobiles and kind of subsidize that to some extent. If their product was really terrible or if it was causing me to have a lot of mechanical issues, I simply don't have the time nor the desire to deal with something like that. So I mention that because I do believe in the product. I do love the product. I do love working with them. And if it was something that really caused me headaches, I just wouldn't do it. Take that for what it's worth. Again, this is not a review of the Silber Turbo specifically. Kind of goes against the ethics of the channel and that I do work for them. This is more a review of the Alpha in turbo form. There are other turbo kits out there. I'm sure they work great as well. This is kind of what you would expect from the Alpha in turbo form if you so choose to go that direction. The second point I want to make is I am used to turbocharged snowmobiles. I've ridden them for over 5 years now. There is a different dynamic to riding an aftermarket turbo snowmobile than compared to a stock snowmobile. I think it's worth noting this because I think if you've never ridden one before, your thoughts off the get-go might be different than what my thoughts are. I do think after you ride one for a little bit of time, it becomes second nature. Third thing is, if you're interested in my Alpha thoughts more broadly, check out my pre-turbo review. This is on my channel. This is specific to the snowmobile in turbocharged clothing, let's say. I'm not going to revisit all the small nuances of the Alpha platform. Like I said, you can go check that out on the Naturally Aspirated review. All right, let's get into the review. First, let me just talk about setup briefly. This is the 3-inch 165 ATAC. That's the electronically controlled suspension model, running 5 to 6 psi. Ran a little more than that at times, ran less than that. I threw a little av gas to keep the motor happy. Clutching was all the supplied Silber stuff. I didn't run any aftermarket clutching or my own clutching. Okay, let's start with the good. Simply put, as I wrote in my notes, it's fun. I don't know how else to put it. It's if you've never ridden a two-stroke turbocharged snowmobile, there's not much like it in the world. I think the only products that I could compare it to would be like a Group B rally car, or a helicopter, or like a Formula One car. I know it sounds like I'm reaching, but I don't think I am. There's just something about the power, the way the power is delivered, the sound, the feel, all of that. With a two-stroke snowmobile, there's just very few things that I've ever been around that puts a smile on your face and makes you feel like this does. It's an absolute monster in deep snow. This is really where the sled shines. I would say if you don't often ride deep snow, or you're not like a huge hill climber, I don't know why you'd buy one of these. This is really where it shines. This is really what it's designed for. This is where, you know, on the right day, your buddies are going to be poaching your tracks just because you can go places simply they can't. And it really is more fun on the deep days. Now, even when it's not deep, you know, I inferred that maybe this isn't for you. No, that's not totally true. It'll still put a huge smile on your face. Again, near 200 horse. And it just allows you to do things when you're on boost that you just can't do with a naturally aspirated sled. Obviously, this is a longer track snowmobile, but I was still able to lift the skis and throw it around, do really fun things. It's usually more reserved for the 155, or 154, whatever your model is. Another really interesting point to me, I've ridden the factory Skidoo Turbo. I do have the Polaris factory Turbo on order if it'll ever show up. This particular snowmobile is definitely more capable than the Skidoo factory OEM Turbo. I know I might get some pushback there, but it just comes down to power delivery. This one has more power on tap than the Skidoo, and it's because it's adjustable. Yes, you can flash the Skidoo. You can use Silber or a number of other companies to upgrade the output of the Skidoo, in which case I'm sure you can match the power output of the Silber Alpha here. But just in out-of-the-box form, this is a more powerful snowmobile than the Skidoo, and I personally enjoy the power delivery. It's very raw, it's very real. It's definitely not as linear as, say, the OEM Turbo. You're going to notice a little less power down low, but you're going to come into boost maybe a little faster. Now, how does that work? Well, there is a restriction point. Anytime you've got a turbo on the snowmobile, there is a restriction point. All the OEMs are using certain clever ways to get around this and draw air into the motor with the turbo not necessarily being spooled at low RPM. The Silber kit doesn't do this. It's gonna push all exhaust right through the turbo at low RPM, which yes is gonna put less power out down low, very early in the RPM range, but you're going to be into boost very, very quickly. You know, I'm making boost at 5,500 RPM, whereas the Skidoo doesn't make a ton of boost until you get higher into the RPM range. So again, this is something to keep in mind. It does require slightly different riding style, in my opinion. You have to be more aggressive, use the brake more aggressively. And what I mean by that is when I'm on it, I'm on it. And when I'm not, I'm not. And I'm not going to sit in the middle, especially when I'm going really slow, very often. When I am moving and I am riding and I'm in a line, I am able to back off, maybe go half throttle or whatever. Otherwise, you're going to see really aggressive stabs at the throttle, really aggressive, I don't know what to say, stabs of the brake, grabbing the brake very aggressively, stopping that track, but keeping the turbo spooled by continually aggressively stabbing the throttle. This leads me to the bad parts of this setup. First, it's really not meant for a new rider. Now, that doesn't mean you need to be a pro, but if you've barely ridden a mountain snowmobile, I would steer you away from any turbocharged snowmobile, let alone an aftermarket turbocharged snowmobile. Somebody who's still learning to get their sled on edge, you just do better with a naturally aspirated dead stock snowmobile. It's just me being honest. The other bad thing is, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but you do need to reconfigure the snowmobile's suspension. Now, this gets into the weeds a little bit with respect to weight transfer, how a snowmobile that weighs over 500 pounds on snow can feel so light under the rider. And how that really works is the weight transfers from the skis to the track, and it's balanced somewhere in the middle. It's obviously not all on the track unless you're wheeling, which is really fun, but clearly anybody that's ridden a snowmobile with all the weight on the skis will attest to it being really heavy, really not that fun, and really not what we're looking to do. That feeling where the sled becomes weightless is really all about transfer, and a snowmobile with a turbo is going to transfer that weight much differently than a snowmobile without a turbo. So you do need to make some adjustments. Personally, I always stiffen the rear track shock. I often release the limiter, which sounds crazy, but what I want the sled to do is get up on the snow quickly, and then I run very, very little pressure in the front track shock, or a lesser spring rate, back the preload off, that sort of thing. I actually use scales to configure the snowmobile to get the weight distribution just like I want it in static form, and then I tune from there to get my wheeling under control while still getting the sled to feel light once you're on it. I know that at very, very low RPM, the sled's always going to feel heavy. So I want to get that snowmobile to feel light the second I start moving. And this is the configuration I like. Yes, I did steal it from Brett Rasmussen. The final thing I want to make a point about in terms of bad things is the Alpha is a little bit tricky in hard snow, and this is exacerbated with the turbo. Simple as that. Moving on to problems, I had no motor problems. I'm not making that up. This has been my, I think, 5th or 6th season with a turbo snowmobile from Silber. I've never, knock on wood, had a motor problem. They do a great job as long as you set the snowmobile up correctly. It'll probably work just as intended. I did unfortunately have the primary clutch fail right as I put the kit on. In fact, it was probably done before I put the kit on. It just, the problem reared its ugly head when I put the turbo kit on. It wasn't shifting out properly. Unfortunately, due to the way Arctic Cat has built their clutch, I really just had to buy a new one. I mean, you could technically fix it, but the number of parts and tools I'd need made it easier just to buy a new clutch. That sucked. Second thing is I had the chain case fail almost right away as well. The tensioner failed, ended up putting a hole in it. Could have this been boost related? Maybe, but it is an auto tensioner, not something I'm a huge fan of. I'd much prefer a manual tensioner like you find on the Skidoos, or better, a belt drive, which is what I upgraded it to. The track showed some durability issues. That being said, I'm not the nicest to my tracks. Again, as I mentioned in my naturally aspirated review, I'd really be curious how the sled would do in a dual rail configuration, and I think the track would even do better as well. And then the final part I want to make, the final comment I want to make with respect to problems is the parts are just hard to come by. I did put a hole in one of the intake vents, couldn't even get an intake vent. Just a little screen to cover that back up. So it's kind of a bummer. I don't know if the supply chain last year was to blame and this year will be better. Hard to imagine that, but maybe. So just something to keep in mind if you are riding a Cat, maybe get those parts in your hands ahead of time, like the wear parts that we all know you need. A few closing thoughts on the kit and who this is really for. Obviously, at just under $3,700, $3,500, it's not cheap, but dollar for dollar, there's nothing else out there that's going to add more horsepower to your machine than a turbocharger. And frankly, the Silber kit is very affordable. It's the most affordable kit on the market. It really has been pull the rope, go ride. Again, I'm not trying to review the kit, but I just want to let anybody know I've really enjoyed my experience on it. If you're looking to compete with an OEM factory turbo, this is really your only option. Not only will you compete, but the snowmobile will put out more power than the OEM turbo. If you're looking to maybe do a motor mod and you're considering the turbo, really I'd say leave the sled dead stock or do the turbo. Now you can make a handling modification, that might help you out, that might be worth the money, but in my experience, it's either turbo or leave it alone. All the other mods in the middle really are about spending money that you don't get much back for in terms of actual horsepower and actual performance on snow. The next review you guys will see me do will thankfully, hopefully, be the Polaris OEM boosted sled. Hopefully I'll be taking delivery of that here in the next few weeks. But more importantly, we need snow. So everybody go wash your truck, do a snow dance, burn an old snowmobile. I don't know what you have to do to get it to snow, but we need snow. Cheers, everybody. Appreciate you guys taking the time. Bye.